Welcome to the LDHR Podcast, where ministry leaders grow together. Over the next few months, we will be releasing episodes intermittently alongside our other series to talk about growing on purpose, highlighting the people and pathways for growing where you are and with what you've been entrusted. Through these episodes, you'll hear from people with insights and practical steps that you can apply right away. You'll also have the opportunity to find out more about the resources that are available to you and how you can intentionally grow on purpose wherever God has you. Come on in and listen. We're so glad you're here. Terry Morgan, welcome to the LDHR Podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks, Beth. It's great to be here with you.
So Terry, you've been on staff for 43 years, serving in many different capacities and locations. Can you tell us just a little bit about your crew journey and then where you are currently living and what role you are currently serving in?
Sure. I started out, as many do, in the campus ministry. I started at the University of Iowa, which is where I met my husband and had some great early years there. Then a number of years in campus ministry with good friends in New Mexico, and eventually ended up in Mexico, an international assignment for almost 20 years. And we came back in 2012, and I got to join the VP LDHR team under Andrea Buczynski, which now is led by Abraham George. And that's where I'm currently serving. I live in Orlando and love having an international or global reach as well.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. So today we are talking all about feedback. So can you take us back to when you first created 30 Days of Feedback? What was happening at the time that made you think this needs to exist?
Sure. Well, I actually had to look and see what was the year. It goes all the way back to 2016.
Wow.
And we were doing sort of an emphasis on position-focused conversations, and we really wanted to help build a feedback-rich culture in our ministry. And it started out initially as a social media campaign. People could sign up for a month of daily emails or follow the posts on Facebook or Instagram. Then the content was eventually printed into sort of a flip book format. We wanted to help people feel more comfortable with feedback, both in giving and receiving feedback, by offering short reflections and practical tips, just simple bite-sized learning and encouragement that they could look at each day.
Right. So recently, you and your team took that material and you reimagined it into a full learning course on ldhr.org. What gap or need did you see that led you to realize the content needed to expand beyond the original format?
Well, we're still talking about position-focused conversations globally. And actually, the word feedback kept showing up as a common search term on our ldhr.org website. So we sensed the need. Since the original content was meant to be just very small nugget bites of information, we figured that we could easily add some more depth and some more richness by getting other people's opinions, other people's content into it, if we made it into a course. And so that's what we decided to do.
That makes sense. And as you were building the course, what's something about feedback that surprised you or challenged your own thinking?
There's a lot, actually. I often think that God gives me these things to work on because He's trying to do something in my own life. Principle-wise, I was really challenged when I first heard that people who don't hear feedback from us typically assume that we don't care about them or don't like them, that the absence of feedback can be as hurtful as feedback itself. And that has really encouraged me to lean into this. One of the practical tips that challenged me was a recent addition in the course that talked about using questions to help someone do a kind of self-feedback. You mentioned powerful questions in a recent podcast with Bob Tiede, and this shows up in the same way. Oftentimes, a person already knows what they did well and what they could improve. And so instead of telling them, if I ask them, how do you think you did? What could you celebrate? What can you improve? Then the person owns the feedback more. And when I invite the person to do that kind of self evaluation, there's no reason for defensiveness or excuses. Obviously, that method doesn't work in every situation, but I am challenged. I'd like to try to use it more often in my own feedback.
Right. That resonates a lot with me, especially that even that first comment of people in the absence of feedback will fill in that you don't care. And I can remember times in my life when I've asked for feedback or questions and you get nothing. So, is there a moment, lesson, or exercise in the course that you find yourself especially excited about or coming back to often?
Yes, I personally really enjoy the emphasis on the heart. We have this in both receiving and giving feedback. And I realize that when I'm receiving feedback, if my heart is open and I'm humble and trusting God, then I want to hear what others have to say about my work or how they're experiencing me. I also know that I've been too hard on others when giving feedback, especially when my focus was too centered on myself, what I wanted, or the way I thought something should be done. So the reminders to focus my part on the other person are so helpful for me. I can return to those lessons over and over.
Mm. What are some practical ways you find yourself making that heart shift when you feel like it is in the wrong place?
I think obviously taking time to pray, taking time to ask God, is this something that is just me focused? Is this just a preference? Or is this actually an area where I can help this other person grow? My feedback would help them be better at what they're doing.
Mm.
And that helps me to know when to lean into an issue and when to maybe just get over it, not make a big deal out of it.
It takes a bit of wisdom and I think prayer to know that difference of when to let it go and when to lean into it.
Yes.
So, can you share a time when feedback, either given to you or by you, really changed something important?
Yes, I actually thought of number of times as we've worked through this course, but I remember a time when I was talking with someone who I viewed as a mentor, and I was basically complaining about some people on my team and talking a lot about how I needed to confront them about some things that they weren't doing. And she just listened, and then she gently but firmly mentioned that I might be having or using the wrong vocabulary, that word confront,
Mm.
which was also affecting my attitude. And she suggested that I read a book that, once I had gotten through it, changed my entire approach to those kinds of conversations. I think back and I'm grateful for her feedback to this day.
Yeah. What book did she recommend?
It was actually called Crucial Conversations.
That's a great book.
We have another
S-
course about that.
When people hear the word feedback, it's usually a bit loaded. It's not an easy
Yeah.
word. So, what do you think are people's biggest misconceptions about feedback or hesitancy to it?
Well, I think when people hear the word feedback, they almost always think of negative feedback.
Mm.
Sometimes that's because it's basically the only kind of feedback they have received. Or, as you said, it was the situations that were really charged. And that makes me really sad because I think if we were better at giving positive, encouraging feedback, and that became sort of the definition of feedback in people's minds, they wouldn't be so afraid of it. And if we learn to give feedback as that gift, like we talked about after prayer, and having the right heart that truly wants to help the other person grow and develop, it also would not be so difficult to receive. We can overcome these misconceptions or these hesitancies to feedback, I think, if we do it right.
Mm. I think too, using positive feedback and even naming it as this is feedback, I think could help us with that shift too of not seeing it just as something that is negative. Because we
Yes.
tend to say positive feedback, oh, it's just praise, it's just a compliment. But in reality, I think it is actually feedback.
Yes.
So, a lot of our listeners are listening from different parts of the world, and people have different cultures, different perspectives. So, in global or cross cultural teams, what are some nuances people should be aware of when giving or receiving feedback?
That's really a great question. And there are definitely places where feedback to a leader or someone who's older, an elder, is not encouraged.
Mhm.
And there are places actually where positive feedback is not seen as necessary. They figure you're just doing your job and I don't need to tell you you're doing it well. Those are challenges to feedback. I think this is another opportunity where using powerful questions is really helpful. There isn't just one way to do feedback. The course doesn't just say this is the only way to do it. There are many different views and approaches to feedback. And to be honest, it doesn't just vary by geography or nationality, but it's also going to be based on the personality of the people involved, their age, their past experiences with feedback, and lots of other factors. So I would really want to encourage people to enter in with a learner mindset and be asking the people involved, like, how would you prefer to receive feedback? Or how can I improve in giving you feedback? I would be compassionately curious, what makes it hard for you to receive or give feedback? There's no one size fits all method, but there's lots of suggestions to try and lots of principles to apply. I think it's likely that we can all find something to help us get better at feedback for our context.
That's a really helpful perspective. It sounds like those could be some really great questions in a team atmosphere, maybe on a cross cultural team, to ask one another about how we prefer feedback, what our preferences are. So, in
Sure.
the course, if they go to ldhr.org and find it, it starts by inviting feedback before giving feedback. So, why is it important that people learn how to receive feedback and not just give feedback well?
Well, I believe that the more that we practice receiving feedback, the better we are at giving feedback. We experience personally what it feels like to receive feedback. If we receive positive feedback, for instance, we know how that encouragement can build our confidence and empower us and motivate us to build on our strengths. And when we realize how helpful that is to us, I think that motivates us to be more likely to offer it to others too.
Mm.
On the other hand, when we invite feedback that points out different opinions, areas for improvement, or ways that we've hurt somebody, we also know how hard it can be to receive feedback. And so our own experiences might help us to be more careful when we're giving feedback to others. It's also an issue of modeling. If others see that we're willing to receive feedback, then they're more likely to do that too. So the receiving end is just as important as the giving end, and maybe even more important.
That makes a lot of sense. So, in crew, we often use the phrase or talk about building a feedback rich culture. And you even mentioned that at the beginning of when you first created the 30 days of feedback. What does that actually mean? And what does that actually look like in everyday work and relationships?
Well, I think it's going to really look different in different places and on different teams. But I think in all cases, it would include people who speak truth with love
Hmm.
and trust that others want good for them. It would mean that people show courage by saying what is helpful and that they respond with humble learning when they're receiving what's being said to them. It would mean possibly intentionally setting up official opportunities to invite and give feedback, like the position focused conversations or the Global 360, maybe a suggestions box, some other creative ways, but
Hmm.
also lots of informal conversations. Just the continual, hey, you did a really good job on this specific thing. Or, hey, would you give me your opinion on this or what I just did? It becoming very normal to receive and give feedback to each other.
So, what I'm hearing you say is having some formal but also informal ways to do feedback in
Yes.
that team dynamic. And so, for someone who wants to create this kind of culture, what's maybe a good place that they could start?
I think just start with yourself.
Hmm.
Start by inviting others to give you feedback. Um, Something simple like, how could I serve you better? Or what would you like more of from me as your teammate or as your team leader? That's a great place to start.
Mm. That reminds me, one of my favorite questions from the course are the questions of what could I start doing and what could I stop doing? I think could
Yes.
be great questions to ask also to invite
Yeah.
that feedback. That's great. So if someone listening today wanted to take just again one step toward growing in feedback, either the giving or receiving, what would you suggest they try this week?
I think you can just intentionally look for opportunities to give sincere, specific, positive feedback to people. Start there. There's lots of great ideas about how to do that well in the course, but I think letting people know that you see them and value them, that lays a really healthy foundation for when the harder conversations might need to take place.
Mm. It sounds like using that positive feedback and learning how to give that well kind of gets that muscle going to be able to give maybe some harder feedback in other times. So, practicing getting that muscle stronger, even in giving that positive feedback, will continue to help them grow and strengthen them later on.
Yes, positive feedback is feedback.
Mhm.
It's
Yes.
it's part of it. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you could leave our listeners with just one mindset shift about feedback today, what would it be?
I would love for people to realize that feedback, when done right, is truly a gift.
Mm,
None of us is perfect. We all need lots of encouragement. And we also need others to tell us the truth about growth issues we have. We don't want to be feeling unseen or unknown. And we don't want to be walking around causing harm to relationships or team productivity and not know that we're doing that.
mm.
I know that it takes effort to give quality, positive feedback, to be thinking about it, the time to go and say it. And I also know that it feels really scary to lean into growth oriented feedback. But I've learned over time that it's totally worth it. And I'm hoping others will agree. I'm hoping the course will help people change mindsets and learn new ways of doing it, and that we can all work together to get better at building each other up and working better for whatever God has for us.
That is a great place to wrap up, Terry. I love that. That feedback truly is a gift, and we want to be able to give that to others. So, where can people find the course just so they can check it out too and they can grow in feedback?
Of course, the course is on LDHR.org. And we have a learning center. It's right on the top toolbar. You can find the learning center. That's where our courses are. And you'll find it easily there. New course, Embracing Feedback is what it's called. And anyone can sign up using an Okta sign in. Even outside of crew, you can offer it to family, friends, partners, pastors. And I hope they enjoy it.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure we put a link in our show notes so people can just click and find it as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Terry.
Thanks, Beth. That's great to be here with you.
What a meaningful reminder from Terry that feedback is truly a gift. We all need one another to offer encouragement and to help us see where we can grow. If you'd like to take the next step, check out our new Learning Center course, Embracing Feedback, at ldhr.org to help you continue building feedback-rich environments wherever you serve. And we love your feedback too. Share your thoughts in the comments below or through the Google form at the end of the course. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got some great content ahead. See you next time.